them write their sermons. ChatGPT is the favorite. These numbers are sparking some concern amongst church leaders, especially on the question of accuracy and plagiarism. Supporters and developers of the technology say those obstacles can be overcome. Meanwhile, even in congregations where the pastor doesn't use AI, it is often being used for bookkeeping and other tasks. Michael Harrington reporting.
Some legal experts predict the Ten Commandments will be before the Supreme Court again sometime soon. At least a dozen states have considered proposals that would require the posting of the Decalogue in public school classrooms. Texas and Louisiana, as well as Arkansas, mandating their display in 2024 and 2025. This is SRN News. Technology is changing just about everything these days.
Well, back in the good old days, if you were in the slammer, your wife would bake an apple pie with a file in it and bring it to you. Not anymore. A drone dropped a package of goodies in a South Carolina prison yard 3 weeks before Christmas. Package contained steak, crab legs, marijuana, and cigarettes. The drone was recovered. No arrests have been made. Flying a drone near a prison in South Carolina, well, that's a misdemeanor. Dropping contraband, that is a felony. Jason Walker reporting.
Jasmine Crockett is launching a campaign for the Senate in Texas. The Democrat filed a run against Republican John Cornyn, aiming to flip a seat in the Lone Star State. The Democrats have not won statewide in more than 3 decades. If she were to pull it off, it would help the Democrats in their bid to try and reclaim the Senate majority on Capitol Hill. More of these stories at SRNnews.com.
Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 16 gives us this word about true values. Better is little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. God's statement concerning values in Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 16.
Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Do you know Christ as your Savior? Learn of him daily, right here on VCY America.
VCY America is on the air. KVCX Gregory, WVIW Bridgeport. Online at vcyamerica.org.
History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
In the year 1891, on this day, December 9th, President Benjamin Harrison wrote, "This government has found occasion to express to the Tsar its serious concern because of the harsh measures being enforced against the Hebrews in Russia. Great numbers have been constrained to abandon their homes and leave the empire. It is estimated that over 1 million will be forced from Russia within a few years." President Harrison concluded, "The Hebrew has always kept the law, often under oppressive restrictions. This, as well as the suggestion of humanity, furnishes ample ground for the remonstrances we have presented to Russia."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Friends, we thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today. It was just shy of 4 years ago when we first introduced you to Scott Shera. Scott is the father of Grace Shera. She was a 19-year-old, his 19-year-old daughter with Down syndrome who had tested positive for COVID and was hospitalized. Grace was ushered into eternity October 13th of 2021. Our guest launched a landmark lawsuit. We'll get into that here in a bit in the program. It was called Shera versus Ascension Health et al. Leading up to this, he had warned about the dangers of incentivized health care and where this leads. His work, his story has been chronicled in a chapter of the Wall Street Journal bestseller Rise of the Fourth Reich. His writing has also appeared in Assault on the Image of God. His lawsuit was heard earlier this year before a jury trial, and it was June 19th that the jury rendered their decision against the sheriffs and in favor of Ascension. Well, our guest today has since filed a motion for a new trial regarding wrongful death. They'll be considered by a court December 19th. And forgive some of the coughing, respiratory issues, but Scott, it's your 8th appearance back on Crosstalk. Good to have you back. And give us an understanding of what's taken place. We've got new listeners, new stations. Help us understand what took Grace to the hospital.
Sure, and thanks for having me back again, Jim. It's like talking with an old friend when I get on with you, so it's really nice. So we got to go back now to the COVID era, and in October of 2021, we had no idea that this whole thing that we now call COVID, what it was intended to do, none of that. So we prepared. We had followed what was called the FLCCC, the Frontline COVID Critical Care Doctors Protocol, and Grace had gotten a cold. This was towards the end of September. So we started her on their protocol, and one of the things that the protocol said to purchase was a pulse oximeter. We did that. We started monitoring Grace's oxygen, and on October 6th, her oxygen dropped to 88%, and the protocol said that's an emergency, take her to the hospital. Grace, again, just had a cold. There was nothing wrong with her other than we were blindly following that protocol, which that's the most important thing I could ever tell your listeners is that when you start blindly following protocols out of fear, you're not following God, and things don't go your way in that case, and that's why Grace is not here today. We took her to the hospital on October 6th. She was admitted shortly after midnight on the 7th under the premise that we'll keep Grace in the hospital for 3-4 days as a precautionary, put her on oxygen and a steroid, and she'll be fine. If they would have only done that, Grace would be alive today. If we fast forward to 7 days later, her last day on earth was October 13th of 21. In the last hour and a half of her death, they combined 3 meds that you use in the last hour of somebody's hospice care, Precedex, lorazepam, and morphine. And when it came to revive Grace after giving her those meds, the nursing staff refused to even come in the room. And we learned during that call, our daughter Jessica was in the room with Grace. During that time, she called us panicking, and Cindy, my wife, and I were on the other end of the FaceTime call begging the nurses to save Grace, and they refused. And this is when we learned the doctor had put an illegal do not resuscitate order on her chart. And we watched Grace die on that FaceTime call at 7:27 p.m., October 13th of 2021.
And Scott, I believe it's really important that we emphasize again that the DNR, that the hospital, the protocols, the administrator, whoever put this on her, it was the doctor, you said, that did this?
Yes, the doctor did it, and we found out, during the jury trial, it gets exposed as to what they believe they're doing. That doesn't mean it's right, but they consider that a doctor does not need approval, does not need to have a signed authorization, doesn't even need a witness. The experts that the defense brought in said that a doctor can unilaterally place a DNR on a patient without consent, without a witness, and without a signature, and without a DNR bracelet. And unfortunately, the jury bought that deception.
And that really sends shockwaves throughout to the country here. If a doctor, if somebody can just believe that this is implied consent rather than, actual verbal or written consent from Grace's care providers, or you had, certainly you had healthcare power of attorney for Grace, and even though you voiced objection to that DNR, the doctors putting this on was somehow sanctioned as having implied consent for doing so, and so he got away with it?
What a strange term, implied consent. But yes, that is the term that was used during the trial. that their experts all unanimously agreed that when you cross that threshold into a hospital and an ICU room, you are giving implied consent. And so you virtually turn over all of your rights to the system, and the doctor and nurse don't even have to inform you of anything, including a DNR.
So Grace's life ended October 13th, 2021, and I believe it was just a little over a year later that as you started reviewing everything, you found medical records and all that had taken place. You filed a lawsuit concerning wrongful death, and so that case also was heard earlier this year. So tell us about that suit that you filed and lead us up to that court case heard earlier this year, 2025.
So it took quite a while to go through the medical records, but I had done a very diligent job and then pursued the idea of a lawsuit. We ended up stopped pursuing that because we learned through the process of talking with different attorneys that the odds of winning a medical malpractice case are near zero. And so why chase this? Anyway, by God's providence, things lined up differently, and on April 11th of 2023, we filed the lawsuit. In preparation for filing, a medical malpractice expert had gone through the records and concluded that Grace's life was ended nefariously. And so we had that under our belt. We had an expert already on board that we disclosed with the filing, which is very rare. You don't have to do that in Wisconsin, but we did it because we wanted to show the court that this is a serious case. So we filed the case April 11th, 2023. There were 5 claims. There were wrongful death, medical malpractice, lack of informed consent, medical battery, and a declaratory judgment for the illegal DNR. We went through multiple motions over a period of 2 years, and ultimately all those claims survived the motions to dismiss, and the jury trial started June 2nd of this past summer, June 2nd of 25, and ended with a decision on June 19th in favor of the defense.
Just a few days after that, matter of fact, it was June 23rd that you came on Crosstalk here, Scott, and I asked you directly if you would be appealing this decision, and your response to me was no, but your no was followed by these words, unless the Lord opens the door. Now, Scott, you have taken the steps to appeal this with some new evidence, so tell us about now this open door that you're walking through.
So it's interesting how this happened, because the door that opened, it happened because the judge was under investigation relative to a different trial. And that investigation closed at the end of August. So this is 2 months after our jury trial ended. And that's when I had been talking with the legal team about the idea of a motion for a new trial. And that's different than an appeal, because a motion for the new trial goes back to the same judge or a judge in the, not the appellate court, but the civil court. And, that's when this but the Post-Crescent, which is the Appleton, Wisconsin newspaper, published an article about this case, and the judge decided, as part of that, in closing the investigation, he chose to resign. So he's resigning on February 1st of 26. And so as I was talking with the legal team, they were talking about the idea that the discovery of new evidence. And, for me, I remembered back to the May 20th hearing. This is before the trial. The judge had ruled against our motions in limine without ever hearing them, and it was in response to an interview that I had granted to the Post-Crescent. And he angrily responded that there are going to be consequences. All the consequences are going to be against the plaintiff. And then he unilaterally denied our motions in limine. And that's when it dawned on me that I think we have an opportunity to file this motion for new trial. And I mean, I know you've read it, Jim. It's is meticulous in going through what he did at the hearing, and it's a rebuke of what he did to deny our motions in limine. Go ahead, Jim.
Let me just have you define that for us, because that's a new term for many. Motion in limine. What exactly is that?
You read my mind. Mm-hmm. So what happens in our legal system is that when there's the pretrial, so all jury trials will have a pretrial. During the pretrial, many things are discussed, but one of the things that are discussed is each side files motions in limine. And these are things that each side either wants or doesn't want to be admissible in the trial. Mm-hmm. So the defense had filed 22, 23 of these. We had gone through all of them on the defense side. And then when it came to our side, after the judge had learned about my interview with the Post-Crescent, that's when he made the comment I referenced earlier and denied all of ours. Well, our motions in limine were designed to make the case solely about what happened to Grace during the 7-day hospital stay, not bring up my religious beliefs, not bring up my research that I had done post Grace's death about what happens in hospitals, what happens in the medical industrial complex, and the judge denied all of those. So what ended up happening at the trial is because of that the denial, the defense was able to jump on that opportunity, which of course they would. I mean, they were able to paint me as a crackpot, different than the jury of my peers. So now the jury saw me in the light of this religious conspiracy theorist that, of course, they don't like that. And so that's ultimately was one of the pieces of the puzzle that tainted the jury.
Friends, we're talking today with Scott Schara, and again, the father of Grace Schara, and we're just recounting what took place. Grace was hospitalized, and through a combination of deadly drugs, their net effect was the taking of her life. October 13th, 2021, a wrongful lawsuit was filed against the doctor, against the hospital system. The trial held in June, and then came back the verdict against the Scharas and in favor of the healthcare system. And right now we have a motion for a new trial taking place. Our guest here after the break is going to go further into this topic here, because he is saying, yes, there was personal bias against him by the court. His religious views were targeted, and as a result, the jury was prejudiced against him even before they went to render their verdict. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation researcher with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, just how intelligent were the Neanderthal people?
Chris, the Neanderthals were people just like me and you. They were descendants of at least one of the tribes that migrated away from the Tower of Babel. Perhaps they lived in harsh conditions, but they were fully human. Archaeologists have even found that they had musical instruments, using the hollowed-out bones of animals perforated with holes like a flute. When replicas of these are made, it's found that they used the same musical scale that we use today. Mostly they preferred minor keys. Of course, even the Israelites are known for their songs in minor keys, producing beautiful but haunting melodies. You see, Chris, even Neanderthals go back to Genesis, and so should we.
To equip yourself with facts that support your faith, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Scott Schara is with us today. This is his 8th appearance on Crosstalk, and for some of you, you've been keeping up with this. The nature of this account have taken place. Others of you, perhaps the very first time you're hearing it. I'd encourage you to go back to crosstalkamerica.com and just put Schara in the search engine, SCHARA, and you'll find our previous interviews on this very topic. So Scott has filed a motion for a new trial now. The date is coming up for that motion to be heard. But, Scott, let's review again some of these matters that have unfolded, this new evidence that's come about to really substantiate your basis for a new trial, and a lot of it deals with what is called the motion in limine. Give us some examples, if you would.
So I'm going to quote first from the May 20th hearing. So I had to get the transcript from the May 20th hearing so that we could put this together, because it was all from memory at that point. But the judge, he had this quote is what I had mentioned earlier. There will be a consequence, and that consequence is going to be on the plaintiff's side. That was in reaction to me giving the post-Crescent interview. At the time, I just assumed, okay, he's frustrated that I gave an interview so close to the trial, not thinking that there's a bias. I thought, okay, well, the judge is the judge. You know, who am I to judge the judge, right? Anyway, then shortly after that, this is another quote from the May 20th hearing. He said, I'm going to deny the plaintiff's motions in limine in their entirety. So what did he deny? And I'm going to give you two very specific examples. So this was from our written motions in limine. The judge had all these before the May 19th and 20th hearing. And so one of them I'm going to read from the motion that our legal team filed. He said, Wisconsin statute 90610 explicitly prohibits evidence of religious beliefs or opinions to show that the witness's credibility is impaired or enhanced. Additionally, under Wisconsin statute 904.03, even relevant evidence may be excluded if its prohibitive value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice, confusion of issues, or misleading the jury. This evidence has minimal to no probative value regarding the specific claims at issue. The only possible purpose of defendants introducing plaintiff's religious beliefs would be to prejudice the jury against him based on his personal religious convictions. This would violate state statute 906.10 and would be unduly prejudicial under Wisconsin statute 904.03. So that was one of them. Another one is even more pointed, and this is what ended up happening. Specifically, what we called out in the motions in limine happened at the trial. And our legal team wrote, allowing this evidence, and they're specifically talking about the evidence of my research after Grace's death, allowing this evidence would risk converting this trial into a referendum on vaccination policies or hospital care generally, which would be improper and prejudicial. And anybody watching the trial, of course, I was there. I mean, that is precisely what happened because the defense was able to jump on this opportunity because of the judge's denial.
And so they did that, and they were able to target this bias against you. They were able to look at your religious views, and as a result, Scott, you believe the jury was prejudiced against you.
I believe 100% they were prejudiced against me. It's interesting as you look through, would they have made a different decision? That's not for me to judge either, but they would have had an opportunity to at least see the evidence in an objective light. There's so much programming in our culture that, that's why it is very hard to win a medical malpractice lawsuit, because you're going up against the beast. In this case, the tentacle, the medical industrial complex. People are programmed to trust their doctor. They believe that the doctor's following a Hippocratic oath, versus the reality is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services controls all of healthcare in this country, and our healthcare system is designed to hasten death.
You had also sought a declaratory judgment regarding the DNR order on Grace's medical chart. Tell us about that.
Well, this was, in my opinion, the most important claim. This claim had no financial benefit, but we looked at the lawsuit as an opportunity to stop behavior. And so the idea, if you just think about it logically, who would ever have the right to put a DNR on a person other than the person themselves? It doesn't make any sense. And so that's why we had the declaratory judgment claim. We wanted the judge to rule on this DNR regardless of the jury. And he had the right to do that. And even though, in our motion, I wrote that the facts necessary for the court to issue a declaratory judgment that Dr. Shokar placed an illegal DNR on Grace's chart in violation of Wisconsin Statute 154.19 were undisputed, and the court had already determined that the statute applied to those facts. So that's an undisputed piece of the jury trial, and yet the court did not rule on that declaratory judgment. They, unfortunately, when they sealed up the case, put the bow around the case, the court buried their ruling, which was to not rule on the declaratory judgment in the defense's motion to end the case.
And that's so critical, because this is something that allows that status quo, the protocol, so to speak, to continue on for other people that may be in a similar situation as Grace.
Exactly, and that's why I cannot tell people strong enough. This is what is happening, and it is, if you're not awake to this type of thing happening, it is going to happen to you. I can't stop talking about that, Jim.
Yeah, and the other thing, and you just alluded to it just a bit ago, but you made this in your motion for a new hearing on this as well, is the no financial benefit issue. There are those who, just naturally assume that you're in this for the money, but you made it very clear that that's not what this is about.
Well, Cindy, my wife and I even turned over, to the extent that we would win at the trial, we turned over any financial benefit to Grace's nonprofit before the trial began. So then we could be above reproach. We did not want this trial to be about money whatsoever.
Yeah. You also had a battery claim that was dismissed. What was the basis for that claim? And then you indicated the dismissal was erroneous.
Yeah, the basis for the battery claim is that you have a touching that ended up in a death, and the touching was not approved. And in this case, we didn't even have knowledge of the touching. So, the defense, of course, claimed, well, they never touched Grace because they inserted the meds through the IV line. So the judge did not buy that foolish argument. But, so there was an unwanted touching that we were not provided informed consent related to. Well, the unwanted touching was the combination of Precedex, lorazepam, and morphine. And as far as informed consent, we didn't even have knowledge. So, it was lack of knowledge. There was an obvious battery claim. That's where this whole idea of implied consent came about. And that's how they dismissed the battery claim, was that they did not have to provide you any knowledge. There's an implied consent when you cross the threshold in an ICU room, and that's how the battery claim was thrown out. Okay,
so your motions in limine, anything you wanted there was denied. And we understand that there are other rulings from this judge that have come into question, and you learned about that afterwards as well. Is that correct?
Well, what I learned specifically is about his bias against the post-Crescent. That's the newly discovered evidence. When we were dealt the card of Judge McGinnis, I had done a quick search on Judge McGinnis, saw that I had seen an article in Wisconsin Watch and saw, well, he's under investigation. One of our attorneys is a former Wisconsin judge. I brought that to him, and he just said, well, that's, judges are under investigation all the time. So we didn't think anything of the fact that he was under investigation, that, the former Wisconsin judge, encouraged me along that line. And so I understand that. If you're a judge, I suppose you're going to always have controversy around your decision. So, that was not the bothersome thing. The discovery of new evidence was that, okay, there's this potential of bias against the Post-Crescent, and that ended up transferring to me because of the interview I gave the Post-Crescent.
So just going back to this DNR, because this is such an important issue here, friends, Scott, is it true then that the jury was prevented from even deciding if there was consent given for a DNR, a proper consent for it?
Yeah, that was not on the jury questionnaire regarding the proper consent. They never got to that issue because of the overriding issue is that, did the doctor have to provide informed consent on any of these things? So once they answered no to that question, none of the related questions applied anymore.
So you then filed in the court October 29th, not too many weeks back, a motion for reconsideration, a new trial to take place. Tell us about this process, and you've got a date that's coming up for this, and I understand that's before the very same judge?
Yes, and I know that sounds strange to listeners, but my biblical responsibility is to talk to the person who created the offense, and in this case is the judge. And, the best thing that could happen relative to this filing is that the judge repents of what happened here, and, that would be a fantastic result. The defense has filed briefs in opposition. Of course, that's their job to file briefs in opposition that basically say that it's too late for me to have filed this, even though that when you have new evidence, you have a year after the jury trial to file a motion for a new trial. And they've also said that if your attorneys knew or should have known about this potential bias with the post-crescent, that's imputed to me. So even though I didn't know, if the legal team knew or should have known, that's imputed to the plaintiff, which is an odd thing. I mean, this is in their legal realm. There's all kinds of these crazy things. But ultimately, the judge did accept the filing and scheduled the hearing for December 19th at 11 o'clock. That hearing is open to the public. So any of the listeners that are in the area, it'll be in the Appleton, Wisconsin, Outagamie County Courthouse. I would encourage them to be at the hearing.
Okay, and so that is next week, December 19th, 11 a.m.?
That's correct.
Okay, and that taking place in Appleton, Wisconsin. Scott, for those who want to continue to follow this or stay abreast or even learn more about this whole matter, bringing us to this point, how can they best do that?
The best way is on Grace's website, which is ouramazinggrace.net. In the very upper right-hand corner, when you go to the website, there's a link that says subscribe to our newsletter, and I write a regular Substack that is a chronology of everything that has happened. So you can go back and search prior Substacks and see exactly how this whole thing is transformed.
Friends, again, the website, ouramazinggrace.net, ouramazinggrace.net. I'm going to open our phone lines. No doubt you have questions regarding this. Maybe you have been in similar situations that have transpired. I mean, to have a DNR placed on your daughter with no authority from you, even objecting to that being done, yet that's the action that was taken by the medical staff and allowed for it, as implied consent. Your questions, your comments are number 800-733-9829. This is Crosstalk. Back in a minute.
Christian film writer, director, and producer Rich Cristiano has released 4 powerful films that motivate, encourage, and challenge believers. These also share an evangelistic message to the lost. VCY is offering the Cristiano 4-pack DVD set. The set includes Unidentified, which follows reporters as they cover the UFO issue only to be confronted by their eternal destiny. The Secrets of Jonathan Sperry, demonstrating the powerful impact a senior citizen has on young boys to reach others with the gospel. Play the Flute, which follows a youth leader who is put in charge of a teen group that is filled with spiritual apathy and finds himself in an uphill battle. And then A Matter of Faith, showing a Christian girl whose faith is challenged as she leaves for college. This 4-pack Cristiano set is available for $35 when you call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Scott Schara is our guest here today, and the Schara versus Ascension, well, a motion for new trial coming up. Our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. Scott, it's important also that we take a bird's eye view to get the big picture of what's happening in all of this. We all went, experienced what happened during the era of COVID, and some, have referred to it as the pandemic. But take us through, how does this fit into what unfolded before us as it relates to COVID? We saw a great scrutiny taking place of medical instructions and mandates from governor's offices and from the medical institutions. We saw laws enacted that really hampered individual freedom, closing of churches, et cetera, et cetera. So paint the big picture of what we have seen unfold here, and now even Grace being a victim, but all of us really being victims as well.
Yeah, so pandemic is a great word. Scamdemic is another word that fits the crime. So this COVID era was 39 months long. During that 39 months, we have to look at this through the lens of a spiritual battle. And when you look at it through the spiritual battle, Satan uses a technique called the Hegelian dialectic, which in simple terms is problem, reaction, solution. So when you look at COVID through the lens of the Hegelian dialectic, they created a problem, which is a fake virus, boogeyman virus, to create a reaction, fear, to implement the pre-designed solution, which is the bioweapon jab. And boy, were they successful. So where Grace's death fits, and this will shock most people because they've done a great job through propaganda blaming China for a release of a boogeyman virus, but the United States was the one that orchestrated this, and it's easily proven when you look at the number of hospital deaths worldwide. The United States was number one in that category, and we were number one by far. We had 1.2 million hospital deaths, and Grace was one of the 1.2 million. And India, whose population is 5 or 4 times that of the United States, their death count was 534,000, less than 50%. So what was the goal? The hospital deaths were critical to the propaganda to get the fear porn going to the highest level possible, that unbelievably almost 80% of the population took the bioweapon jab. And now, as I'm sure you're aware, Jim, there's over 700,000 deaths just in America of people who took the jab, and countless disabilities and people maimed because of the jab, and still those numbers are hidden from the general population.
Friends, our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Laura is calling from Hollywood, Maryland. Laura, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, Jim and Scott. I first want to say I am sorry for your loss there, Scott, with your daughter Grace. But honestly, one of the biggest things that I saw with this COVID, especially when it comes to the medical, was a form of eugenics. Honestly, they wanted the virus to attack the elderly. And then once they had them in the hospitals, anybody that they deemed unfit for life was the target. And it was really about controlling that. And that's always been a part of, the globalist agenda, is to wipe out the population, just like the Georgia Guidestones had on it many years ago.
Thank you, Laura. And Scott, I want you to comment on this because, we even saw, wasn't it in New York where the former mayor had placed COVID patients in a nursing home situation?
This is, Laura, you just hit a major nerve with me because you're spot on. The number one and number two causes of death with COVID on the death certificate in hospitals were elderly and disabled. Well, elderly and disabled are not comorbidities, so that is eugenics. And so how did they pull that off? Well, the average payout to a hospital for a COVID patient was $100,000. The average cost for an elderly or disabled person on the government dole is about $33,000 a year. So they had a 3-year payback to pay the hospitals to kill these people, and Grace was one of those. And it's part of the collectivism agenda, which is is how they implement eugenics. They've convinced the population overall that people who are non-contributing members of society don't deserve medical care. And that, of course, is the elderly and disabled. And how they have done this creatively is the elderly and disabled right now represent 40% of the annual federal budget, roughly $5 trillion a year. There's 135 million Americans on Medicare and Medicaid, and the cost of $5 trillion a year represents, I think I said 40%, over 50% of the annual federal budget. So they've convinced us that, well, we've got to do something about the budget, and the way they do that is ration care. Rationing care of the elderly and the disabled is eugenics, and eugenics is murder. And that is what's happening. They have worked this through the propaganda since the early 1900s, and just about everybody buys into that concept. Think about on a practical level. You think, well, I don't buy into that. Well, if back before World War II, just about every single family took care of their parents. Right now, just about every single family, when their parents get old, and they don't want to take care of them, they put them in a nursing home. Well, that's the idea of collectivism relative to the elderly and disabled.
We've got Pat, our next caller. Hi, Pat, you're on the air.
Oh, hello. Yeah, my sister, Eileen O'Connor, was brutally murdered. She was a beautiful Down syndrome, and she was refused medical care the second time she died. She'd been beaten into a quadriplegic by over 6-foot-tall doctor. And Eileen O'Connor, I was told repeatedly she needed to be put away someplace. I said, well, she is away in our family home, and she's very happy and a wonderful member of society. So they refused her medical care. They sent me records from letters from 2 hospitals saying they would not treat her. I was trying to find a pilot to fly us to a hospital someplace, but she died in her little hospital bed at home.
My.
Wow.
Terrible. My whole family's been murdered here.
Oh, Pat, thank you for the call. Thank you for the call. Scott, your comment.
Well, Pat, thanks for bringing that up. You know, Grace had Down syndrome, as Jim said at the beginning of the show. Grace was the best thing that God ever gave our family, second to salvation. And, you know, the way society judges the disabled and the elderly is morally wrong. And, you know, I am so thankful we had our beautiful angel for 19 years.
Yeah. Friends, our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Paul is our next caller. Hi, Paul, you're on the air.
Hello, yes. Jim, thanks for taking my call. Yes, actually, it's much the opposite. It's been much the opposite with my wife, and she is still alive. When she had a signed document as of October 1st of 2019, where she had an advance directive. She was very much in her right mind. She very much had much of where all the within the advance directive, her final wishes would hopefully have been fulfilled with this, all of them, and also that she wanted a DNR order on it, and also no IV fluids, no feeding tube, no much of any other care other than to simply let her die, and I was much willing to let her go with that. It can be a great blessing to die, and it's also, I think it's in Psalm 116, I don't know what verse, but pleasant in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. And she is now in a nursing home, I could say thankfully, but much of it was within one member of a church that had anonymously reported that there were abuses going on in our home, and the judge's decision was she was incompetent. Well, I don't think she was, but anyway, I'll leave it go with that.
Okay, thank you for the call here. Now, we're talking kind of two different things here because though she wanted a DNR, that is totally opposite with Grace. Grace is not something that orchestrated that, nor her primary caregivers and those who had medical authority over her. Scott?
Yeah, so Paul, I'm going to just address this from a little bit different angle. My former life, I was a practicing CPA, and I did a lot of estate planning. So this idea of advanced directives was part of what you did in a typical estate plan. That paradigm has now changed with what I've learned since Grace's death. It's, the idea of an advance directive seems good, but in this new world that we are in, this medical industrial complex that I've learned about, it ends up giving the medical people a license to do something that you may not want to do. I interviewed a doctor a couple of weeks ago on my podcast, Deprogramming with Grace's Dad, that talked about the brain dead fallacy, where they're harvesting organs, claiming somebody's brain dead, and then harvesting their organs when in fact they aren't brain dead. And the advance directive is now giving a license to do certain things that are nefarious. So I don't encourage people to do an advance directive anymore. Instead, I would encourage you to do a durable medical power of attorney. And a durable means it's active upon signing. You don't need two doctors to determine that the person is incapacitated, and that you discuss your wishes with the medical power of attorney and don't turn those decisions over to a doctor.
Thank you for the call. We've got Martha next in Stratford, Pennsylvania. Martha, you're on the air. Hello, Martha.
Yes.
You're on the air.
No.
Martha, don't listen to your radio. Please listen to your phone. You're on the air.
Oh, okay. I'm flung all over the place, this conversation, but I started listening when they were talking about COVID and eugenics and all this stuff. But a lot of this is driven by economics. That people got admitted to hospitals and they got paid more to admit people under the COVID diagnosis than any other diagnosis. They also got paid a whole lot of money to put these people in nursing homes than they would have elsewhere. These were donors of Cuomo's that own a nursing home. And so they made money off of putting elderly people into the nursing homes. And nobody in their right mind would have put anybody sick in a nursing home, because anybody in healthcare knows that nursing homes can't handle anyone that's very sick. Things spread in nursing homes like crazy. So that had to have been done on purpose. That was a really stupid thing.
Martha, are you in the medical industry?
I am. I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse since 1980.
Okay.
I've worked in intensive care units, and I know that a lot of this was all medically done, and it's also very political. So it was all. And the vaccines, I wouldn't trust the vaccine. I begged my children not to vaccinate my grandchildren because it's not. It has never been shown to really work extremely well. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. And then they told everybody that, if you get COVID, oh, no, you're not covered as well as if you get COVID. Get the vaccine. That's much better. That's not right. It doesn't make any sense. If you listen to...
Thank you, Martha. I'm up against a break. I got to take that. We'll have a response following the break. Thank you for your call here today. But she talked about incentivized medicine. I'm going to have Scott address that, and we've got other callers here online as well. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Recently, actor Kirk Cameron came out, made a shocking video talking about the fact he now believes in the idea that people go to hell for a period of time, not forever, and then they're annihilated. Whoa. This was the guy that was preaching hell's best kept secret and a sound biblical gospel. He's now not only changed his eschatology from when he started in the movies Left Behind, but now he questions whether hell is eternal. He makes the case that it's eternal punishment or eternal judgment, but doesn't have to be eternal torment. But wait a minute, doesn't the Bible speak about in Revelation chapter 14, those who take the mark, that the fire of their torment is forever and ever? There's so many verses that use the word forever. I think this is obviously a real problem and a clear sign that we have to get back to following the Bible. Thus saith the Lord, not thus says a former actor.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Scott Schara is our guest today, and friends, be praying about this court appearance coming up here next week as it relates to a retrial consideration. And you can get all the details at ouramazinggrace.net, ouramazinggrace.net. Scott, just before going into that break, a nurse had called in from Pennsylvania, and she spoke talking about incentivized medicine, about payments coming to the medical industry as a result, and even talk about its politicalization. You kind of found that to be true, too, didn't you?
Yeah, so Martha, I'm impressed that you're speaking out as a nurse, so keep going. The incentivization of healthcare was exposed during COVID. So COVID was the first time there were direct payments for things that were designed to kill people, specifically remdesivir and ventilators. But the idea of incentivized healthcare has been around since the early 80s, and they've done it through what's called standards of care. So a simple one, standard of care for cancer, everybody knows, is chemo. Chemo has a 2.1 success rate with a 5-year survival once you're on chemo treatment. So obviously with a 97.9% kill rate, that is incentivizing healthcare with standards of care. You know, the bigger picture, and I'll just give you a very specific example during COVID. In the fourth quarter of 2021, the jab was incentivized to the tune that if doctors could convince 75% of their patients to get the COVID bioweapon, they would receive almost a $300,000 bonus.
Wow.
Since what other business has a model where you don't have to disclose these financial relationships? In every other business, if you were paid under the table like that, it would be called a deceptive trade practice, but not in the medical industrial complex.
We've got Jesus calling from Glendale, Arizona. Jesus, you're on the air.
Taking my phone call.
Mm-hmm.
I read a news article today about the World Health Organization, and it said that they're getting ready to launch a new unified program or plan on how to deal with coronavirus again.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Scott, there's no end to the plans that are underway, and the World Health Organization certainly has not been a friend to individualized health care.
No, not at all. You know, praise God, he's an individualist, not a collectivist.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you see these things, what should go through your mind is they are trying to deceive us. And any of the things that come out of the federal government or the World Health Organization, consider it a deception, and you'll be right 99% of the time.
Linda from Sardinia, Ohio, you're on the air.
Coronavirus again.
Linda, you're on the air.
Oh, yes. I got the COVID in 2019 for 2 months, and I almost died. And I feel that it was all about the money and health care in the healthcare business and population control. And my sister took the shot 3 years ago, this past November the 12th, and she died 2 weeks later. It stopped her heart. She had that. Well, anyway, it was all done, and these despicable people killed all these people and got by with it. And that's all I got to say.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you for your call here. And Scott, you believe the medical protocols that were followed took your daughter's life.
I do, and you know, of course, we wouldn't have filed a lawsuit if I didn't believe that, and I will believe it until my dying breath.
We have got Jewel calling from Wisconsin. Jewel, you're on the air. Jewel, please, folks, when you call, please have your radio turned down. There's a delay that is built in, and so you get all confused. Jewel, go ahead. You're on the air.
Oh, please have your radio turned down.
Okay, let's go to Ron in New Berlin, Wisconsin. Ron, you're on the air.
Yeah, my question is, what caused your daughter's death?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ron. What caused her death?
You had mentioned 3 meds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead and address that, Scott.
Yeah, so you know, when I shine the light on me, what caused Grace's death is I let the fear take me off of what I'm supposed to do, which is obeying God. When I shine the light on the hospital system, Grace had 2 overdose reactions to Precedex before they gave her Precedex the 3rd time, above the rate that they gave it to her when she had the 2 overdose events. And then they combined Precedex with lorazepam and morphine. The expert that we had, Dr. Gilbert Burdine, when they gave Grace the morphine, what he said is that it's the single most devious thing that he's ever seen in 46 years of medical practice, because they gave her the morphine at 6:15 and had already diagnosed her with no blood pressure 6 minutes earlier at 6:09. So the combination of those meds are ultimately what took Grace's life.
Was one of them trazodone?
No, it was not.
Okay, Presidex. All right. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your call today. We're not going to have time for any further phone calls here today, but this is a case that is going to be heard again, the motion for retrial on December 19th, 11 a.m. And for those in the local area that would like to attend, where can they do that, Scott?
It'll be in the Outagamie County Courthouse, Branch 1, and we have the notice. Well, if you go to the website, ouramazinggrace.net, in the upper right-hand corner, the newsletter will have the copy of the notice, so then you can have the directions, et cetera, to get to the courthouse.
And in our final minute that we have left, what would you like to be the takeaway for our listeners today?
The most important thing that I've learned since Grace's death is, well, two things. Under the Antichrist system, the best thing that you can do to be prepared is get comfortable dying, and the only way you can get comfortable dying is to have trust in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. On the false prophet side, we have false prophets running amok right now, and the way you can test the false prophets is their solutions have nothing to do with how we got here. We got to this point by rejecting God, so consequently their solutions never include repentance, and that's how you can spot the false prophets right now, trying to sell us all kinds of things for our supposed health.
Sell us a bill of goods. And Scott, thank you for coming and sharing your story with us here today, and we ask our listeners to be in prayer regarding this hearing next week, the 19th.
Thank you, Jim. God bless you. Thanks for having me on.
Scott Scherer, our guest today, again, Father of Grace. And friends, it's been very long in the making here over these number of years, but you can get the full story at ouramazinggrace.net, ouramazinggrace.net. And certainly it should trouble all of us about the institution being able to place, against the parents' wishes and against those who had medical authority, a DNR on their daughter. Back next time.
Listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.